before sleep takes you. Step into a world of old fairy tales, gentle stories meant to quiet the mind and ease you into rest. Many years ago, there lived an emperor who was so fond of new clothes that he spent all his money on them in order to be beautifully dressed. He did not care about his soldiers. He did not care about the theater. He only liked to go out walking to show off his new clothes. He had a coat for every hour of the day. And just as they say of a king, he is in the council chamber. They always said here, the emperor is in the wardrobe. In the great city in which he lived, there was always something going on. Every day, many strangers came there. One day, 2 impostors arrived who gave themselves out as weavers and said that they knew how to manufacture the most beautiful cloth imaginable. Not only were the texture and pattern uncommonly beautiful, but the clothes, which were made of the stuff, possessed this wonderful property that they were invisible to anyone who was not fit for his office or who was unpardonably stupid. Those must indeed be splendid clothes, thought the emperor. If I had them on, I could find out which men in my kingdom are unfit for the offices they hold. I could distinguish the wise from the stupid. Yes, this cloth must be woven for me at once. And he gave both the impostors much money so that they might begin their work. They placed 2 weaving looms and began to do as if they were working. But they had not the least thing on the looms. They also demanded the finest silk and the best gold, which they put in their pockets, and worked at the empty looms till late into the night. I should like very much to know how far they have got on with the cloth, thought the emperor. But he remembered, when he thought about it, that whoever was stupid or not fit for his office would not be able to see it. Now, he certainly believed that he had nothing to fear for himself, but he wanted first to send somebody else in order to see how he stood with regard to his office. Everybody in the whole town knew what a wonderful power the cloth had, and they were all curious to see how bad or how stupid their neighbor was. I will send my old and honored minister to the weavers, thought the emperor. He can judge best what the cloth is like, for he has intellect, and no one understands his office better than he. Now the good old minister went into the hall where the 2 impostors sat working at the empty weaving looms. Dear me, thought the old minister, opening his eyes wide, I can see nothing. But he did not say so. Both the impostors begged him to be so kind as to step closer, and asked him if it were not a beautiful texture and lovely colors. They pointed to the empty loom, and the poor old minister went forward rubbing his eyes, but he could see nothing, for there was nothing there. Dear, thought he, can I be stupid? I have never thought that, and nobody must know it. Can I be not fit for my office? No, I must certainly not say that I cannot see the cloth. Have you nothing to say about it? Asked one of the men who was weaving. Oh, it is lovely, most lovely, answered the old minister, looking through his spectacles. What a texture, what colors. Yes, I will tell the emperor that it pleases me very much. Now we are delighted at that, said both the weavers, and thereupon they named the colors and explained the make of the texture. The old minister paid great attention so that he could tell the same to the emperor when he came back to him, which he did. The impostors now wanted more money, more silk, and more gold to use in their weaving. They put it all in their own pockets and there came no threads on the loom. But they went on as they had done before, working at the empty loom. The emperor soon sent another worthy statesman to see how the weaving was getting on, and whether the cloth would soon be finished. It was the same with him as the first one. He looked and looked, but because there was nothing on the empty loom, he could see nothing. "Is it not a beautiful piece of cloth?" asked the two impostors, and they pointed to and described the splendid material which was not there. "Stupid I am not," thought the man, "so it must be my good office for which I am not fitted. It is strange, certainly, but no one must be allowed to notice it." And so he praised the cloth which he did not see, and expressed to them his delight at the beautiful colors and the splendid texture. "Yes, it is quite beautiful," he said to the emperor. Everybody in the town was talking of the magnificent cloth. Now, the emperor wanted to see it himself while it was still on the loom. With a great crowd of select followers, amongst whom were both the worthy statesmen who had already been there before, he went to the cunning impostors, who were now weaving with all their might, but without fiber or thread. "Is it not splendid?" said both the old statesmen who had already been there. "See, your majesty, what a texture, what colors." And then they pointed to the empty loom, for they believed that the others could see the cloth quite well. "What?" thought the emperor, "I can see nothing. This is indeed horrible. Am I stupid? Am I not fit to be emperor? That were the most dreadful thing that could happen to me." "Oh, it is very beautiful," he said. "It has my gracious approval." And then he nodded pleasantly and examined the empty loom, for he would not say that he could see nothing. His whole court round him looked and saw no more than the others, but they said like the emperor, "Oh, it is beautiful," and they advised him to wear these new and magnificent clothes for the first time at the great procession which was soon to take place. "Splendid, lovely, most beautiful," went from mouth to mouth. Everyone seemed delighted over them, and the emperor gave to the impostors the title of court weavers to the emperor. Throughout the whole of the night before the morning on which the procession was to take place, the impostors were up and were working by the light of over 16 candles. The people could see that they were very busy making the emperor's new clothes ready. They pretended they were taking the cloth from the loom, cut with huge scissors in the air, sewed with needles without thread, and then said at last, "Now the clothes are finished." The emperor came himself with his most distinguished knights, and each impostor held up his arm just as if he were holding something, and said, "See, here are the breeches, here is the coat, here the cloak," and so on. Spun clothes are so comfortable that one would imagine one had nothing on at all. But that is the beauty of it. "Yes," said all the knights, but they could see nothing, for there was nothing there. "Will it please your majesty graciously to take off your clothes?" said the impostors. "Then we will put on the new clothes, here before the mirror." The emperor took off all his clothes, and the impostors placed themselves before him as if they were putting on each part of his new clothes, which was ready, and the emperor turned and bent himself in front of the mirror. "How beautifully they fit! How well they sit!" said everybody. "What material! What colors! It is a gorgeous suit. They are waiting outside with the canopy which your majesty is wont to have borne over you in the procession," announced the master of the ceremonies. "Look, I am ready," said the emperor. Doesn't it sit well?" And he turned himself again to the mirror to see if his finery was on all right. The chamberlains, who were used to carry the train, put their hands near the floor, as if they were lifting up the train. Then they did as if they were holding something in the air. They would not have it noticed that they could see nothing. So the emperor went along in the procession under the splendid canopy, and all the people in the streets and at the windows said, "How matchless are the emperor's new clothes! That train fastened to his dress, how beautifully it hangs!" No one wished it to be noticed that he could see nothing, for then he would have been unfit for his office, or else very stupid. None of the emperor's clothes had met with such approval as these had. "But he has nothing on," said a little child at last. "Just listen to the innocent child," said the father, and each one whispered to his neighbor what the child had said. "But he has nothing on." The whole of the people called out at last. This struck the emperor, for it seemed to him as if they were right. But he thought to himself, "I must go on with the procession now." And the chamberlains walked along still more uprightly, holding up the train, which was not there at all. Take a slow breath and let the story fade as another gently begins. A cat had made acquaintance with a mouse, and had spoken so much of the great love and friendship she felt for her, that at last the mouse consented to live in the same house with her, and to go shares in the housekeeping. "But we must provide for the winter, or else we shall suffer hunger," said the cat. "You, little mouse, cannot venture everywhere in case you run at last into a trap." This good counsel was followed, and a little pot of fat was bought. But they did not know where to put it. At length, after long consultation, the cat said, "I know of no place where it could be better put than in the church. No one will trouble to take it away from there. We will hide it in a corner, and we won't touch it till we are in want." So the little pot was placed in safety, but it was not long before the cat had a great longing for it, and said to the mouse, "I wanted to tell you, little mouse, that my cousin has a little son, white with brown spots. She wants me to be godmother to it. Let me go out today, and do you take care of the house alone?" "Yes, go certainly," replied the mouse, "and when you eat anything good, think of me. I should very much like a drop of the red christening wine." But it was all untrue. The cat had no cousin, and had not been asked to be godmother. She went straight to the church, slunk to the little pot of fat, began to lick it, and licked the top off. Then she took a walk on the roofs of the town, looked at the view, stretched herself out in the sun, and licked her lips whenever she thought of the little pot of fat. As soon as it was evening, she went home again. "Ah, here you are again," said the mouse. "You must certainly have had an enjoyable day." "It went off very well," answered the cat. "What was the child's name?" asked the mouse. "Top Off," said the cat dryly. "Top Off," echoed the mouse. "It is indeed a wonderful and curious name. Is it in your family?" "What is there odd about it?" said the cat. "It is not worse than Bread Thief, as your godchild is called." Not long after this, another great longing came over the cat. She said to the mouse, "You must again be kind enough to look after the house alone, for I have been asked a second time to stand godmother, and as this child has a white ring round its neck, I cannot refuse." The kind mouse agreed, but the cat slunk under the town wall to the church, and ate up half of the pot of fat. "Nothing tastes better," said she, "than what one eats by oneself." And she was very much pleased with her day's work. When she came home, the mouse asked, "What was this child called?" "Half Gone," answered the cat. "Half Gone. What a name! I have never heard it in my life. I don't believe it is in the calendar." Soon the cat's mouth began to water once more after her licking business. "All good things in threes," she said to the mouse. "I have again to stand godmother. The child is quite black and has very white paws, but not a single white hair on its body. This only happens once in 2 years, so you will let me go out." "Top off, Half Gone," repeated the mouse. "They are such curious names, they make me very thoughtful." "Oh, you sit at home in your dark gray coat and your long tail," said the cat, "and you get fanciful. That comes of not going out in the day." The mouse had a good cleaning out while the cat was gone, and made the house tidy. But the greedy cat ate the fat every bit up. "When it is all gone, one can be at rest," she said to herself. And at night she came home sleek and satisfied. The mouse asked at once after the third child's name. "It won't please you any better," said the cat. "He was called Clean Gone." "Clean Gone," repeated the mouse. "I do not believe that name has been printed any more than the others. Clean Gone. What can it mean?" She shook her head, curled herself up, and went to sleep. From this time on, no one asked the cat to stand godmother. But when the winter came and there was nothing to be got outside, the mouse remembered their provision and said, "Come, cat, we will go to our pot of fat which we have stored away. It will taste very good." "Yes, indeed," answered the cat. "It will taste as good to you as if you stretched your thin tongue out of the window." They started off, and when they reached it, they found the pot in its place, but quite empty. "Ah," said the mouse, "now I know what has happened. It has all come out. You are a true friend to me. You have eaten it all when you stood godmother, first the top off, then half of it gone, then will you be quiet?" screamed the cat. "Another word and I will eat you up." Clean Gone was already on the poor mouse's tongue, and scarcely was it out than the cat made a spring at her, seized and swallowed her. You see, that is the way of the world. As the night stays quiet, a new tale softly unfolds. There was once a great war, and the king had a great many soldiers, but he gave them so little pay that they could not live upon it. Then 3 of them took counsel together and determined to desert. One of them said to the others, "If we are caught, we shall be hanged on the gallows. How shall we set about it?" The other said, "Do you see that large cornfield there? If we were to hide ourselves in that, no one could find us. The army cannot come into it, and tomorrow it is to march on." They crept into the corn, but the army did not march on, but remained encamped close around them. They sat for 2 days and 2 nights in the corn, and grew so hungry that they nearly died. But if they were to venture out, it was certain death. They said at last, "What use was it our deserting? We must perish here miserably." Whilst they were speaking, a fiery dragon came flying through the air. It hovered near them and asked why they were hidden there. They answered, "We are 3 soldiers and have deserted because our pay was so small. Now, if we remain here, we shall die of hunger, and if we move out, we shall be strung up on the gallows. If you will serve me for 7 years," said the dragon, "I will lead you through the midst of the army so that no one shall catch you." "We have no choice and must take your offer," said they. Then the dragon seized them in his claws, took them through the air over the army, and set them down on the earth a long way from it. He gave them a little whip, saying, "Whip and slash with this, and as much money as you want will jump up before you. You can then live as great lords, keep horses, and drive about in carriages. But after 7 years you are mine." Then he put a book before them, which he made all 3 of them sign. "I will then give you a riddle," he said. "If you guess it, you shall be free and out of my power." The dragon then flew away, and they journeyed on with their little whip. They had as much money as they wanted, wore grand clothes, and made their way into the world. Wherever they went they lived in merrymaking and splendor, drove about with horses and carriages, ate and drank, but did nothing wrong. The time passed quickly away, and when the 7 years were nearly ended, 2 of them grew terribly anxious and frightened. But the 3rd made light of it, saying, "Don't be afraid, brothers. I wasn't born yesterday. I will guess the riddle." They went into a field, sat down, and the 2 pulled long faces. An old woman passed by and asked them why they were so sad. "Alas, what have you to do with it? You cannot help us." "Who knows?" she answered. "Only confide your trouble in me." Then they told her that they had become the servants of the dragon for 7 long years, and how he had given them money as plentifully as blackberries. But as they had signed their names, they were his, unless when the 7 years had passed, they could guess a riddle. The old woman said, "If you would help yourselves, one of you must go into the wood, and there he will come upon a tumble-down building of rocks, which looks like a little house. He must go in, and there he will find help." The 2 melancholy ones thought, "That won't save us," and they remained where they were. But the 3rd and merry one jumped up and went into the wood till he found the rock hut. In the hut sat a very old woman, who was the dragon's grandmother. She asked him how he came, and what was his business there. He told her all that happened, and because she was pleased with him, she took compassion on him, and said she would help him. She lifted up a large stone which lay over the cellar, saying, "Hide yourself there. You can hear all that is spoken in this room. Only sit still and don't stir. When the dragon comes, I will ask him what the riddle is, for he tells me everything. Then listen carefully what he answers." At midnight, the dragon flew in and asked for his supper. His grandmother laid the table and brought out food and drink till he was satisfied, and they ate and drank together. Then, in the course of the conversation, she asked him what he had done in the day, and how many souls he had conquered. "I haven't had much luck today," he said, "but I have a tight hold on 3 soldiers. "Indeed, 3 soldiers," said she, "who cannot escape you." "They are mine," answered the dragon scornfully, "for I shall only give them one riddle, which they will never be able to guess." "What sort of a riddle is it?" she asked. "I will tell you this. In the North Sea lies a dead sea cat, that shall be their roast meat, and the rib of a whale, that shall be their silver spoon, and the hollow foot of a dead horse, that shall be their wineglass." When the dragon had gone to bed, his old grandmother pulled up the stone and let out the soldier. "Did you pay attention to everything?" "Yes," he replied, "I know enough, and can help myself splendidly." Then he went by another way through the window secretly, and in all haste back to his comrades. He told them how the dragon had been outwitted by his grandmother, and how he had heard from his own lips the answer to the riddle. Then they were all delighted, and in high spirits, took out their whip, and cracked so much money that it came jumping up from the ground. When the 7 years had quite gone, the fiend came with his book, and pointing at the signatures said, "I will take you underground with me. You shall have a meal there. If you can tell me what you will get for your roast meat, you shall be free, and shall also keep the whip." Then said the first soldier, "In the North Sea lies a dead sea cat. That shall be the roast meat." The dragon was much annoyed, and hummed and hawed a good deal, and asked the second, "But what shall be your spoon?" "The rib of a whale shall be our silver spoon." The dragon made a face, and growled again 3 times, "Hum, hum, hum," and said to the third, "Do you know what your wineglass shall be?" "An old horse's hoof shall be our wineglass." Then the dragon flew away with a loud shriek, and had no more power over them. But the 3 soldiers took the little whip, whipped as much money as they wanted, and lived happily to their lives' end. The donkey cabbage. There was once a young hunter who went boldly into the forest. He had a merry and light heart, and as he went whistling along there came an ugly old woman who said to him, "Good day, dear hunter. You are very merry and contented, but I suffer hunger and thirst, so give me a trifle." The hunter was sorry for the poor old woman, and he felt in his pocket and gave her all he could spare. He was going on then, but the old woman stopped him and said, "Listen, dear hunter, to what I say. Because of your kind heart, I will make you a present. Go on your way, and in a short time you will come to a tree on which sit 9 birds who have a cloak in their claws and are quarreling over it. Then take aim with your gun and shoot in the middle of them. They will let the cloak fall, but one of the birds will be hit and will drop down dead. Take the cloak with you. It is a wishing cloak, and when you throw it on your shoulders, you have only to wish yourself at a certain place, and in the twinkling of an eye you are there. Take the heart out of the dead bird and swallow it whole, and early every morning, when you get up, you will find a gold piece under your pillow." The hunter thanked the wise woman, and thought to himself, "These are splendid things she has promised me, if only they come to pass." So he walked on about 100 yards, and then he heard above him in the branches such a screaming and chirping that he looked up. And there he saw a heap of birds tearing a cloth with their beaks and feet, shrieking, tugging, and fighting, as if each wanted it for himself. "Well," said the hunter, "this is wonderful. It is just as the old woman said," and he took his gun on his shoulder, pulled the trigger, and shot into the midst of them, so that their feathers flew about. Then the flock took flight with much screaming, but one fell dead, and the cloak fluttered down. Then the hunter did as the old woman had told him. He cut open the bird, found its heart, swallowed it, and took the cloak home with him. The next morning when he awoke, he remembered the promise, and wanted to see if it had come true. But when he lifted up his pillow, there sparkled the gold piece, and the next morning he found another. And so on every time he got up. He collected a heap of gold, but at last he thought to himself, "What good is all my gold to me if I stay at home? I will travel and look a bit about me in the world." So he took leave of his parents, slung his hunting knapsack and his gun round him, and journeyed into the world. It happened that one day he went through a thick wood, and when he came to the end of it, there lay in the plain before him a large castle. At one of the windows, in it stood an old woman with a most beautiful maiden by her side, looking out. But the old woman was a witch, and she said to the girl, comes one out of the wood who has a wonderful treasure in his body, which we must manage to possess ourselves of, darling daughter. We have more right to it than he. He has a bird's heart in him, and so every morning there lies a gold piece under his pillow. She told her how they could get hold of it, and how she was to coax it from him, and at last threatened her angrily, saying, "And if you do not obey me, you shall repent it." When the hunter came nearer, he saw the maiden, and said to himself, "I have traveled so far now that I will rest, and turn into this beautiful castle. Money I have in plenty." But the real reason was that he had caught sight of the lovely face. He went into the house, and was kindly received and hospitably entertained. It was not long before he was so much in love with the witch maiden that he thought of nothing else, and only looked in her eyes, and whatever she wanted, that he gladly did. Then the old witch said, "Now we must have the bird heart. He will not feel when it is gone." She prepared a drink, and when it was ready, she poured it in a goblet and gave it to the maiden, who had to hand it to the hunter. "Drink to me now, my dearest," she said. Then he took the goblet, and when he had swallowed the drink, the bird heart came out of his mouth. The maiden had to get hold of it secretly and then swallow it herself, for the old witch wanted to have it. Thenceforward he found no more gold under his pillow, and it lay under the maiden's. But he was so much in love and so much bewitched that he thought of nothing except spending all his time with the maiden. Then the old witch said, "We have the bird heart, but we must also get the wishing cloak from him." The maiden answered, "We will leave him that. He has already lost his wealth." The old witch grew angry and said, "Such a cloak is a wonderful thing. It is seldom to be had in the world, and have it I must and will." She beat the maiden and said that if she did not obey, it would go ill with her. So she did her mother's bidding, and, standing one day by the window, she looked away into the far distance as if she were very sad. "Why are you standing there looking so sad?" asked the hunter. "Alas, my love," she replied, "over there lies the granite mountain where the costly precious stones grow. I have a great longing to go there, so that when I think of it, I am very sad. For who can fetch them? Only the birds who fly, a man never. If you have no other trouble," said the hunter, "that one I can easily remove from your heart." So he wrapped her round in his cloak and wished themselves to the granite mountain, and in an instant there they were, sitting on it. The precious stones sparkled so brightly on all sides that it was a pleasure to see them, and they collected the most beautiful and costly together. But now the old witch had through her caused the hunter's eyes to become heavy. He said to the maiden, "We will sit down for a little while and rest. I am so tired that I can hardly stand on my feet." So they sat down, and he laid his head on her lap and fell asleep. As soon as he was sound asleep, she unfastened the cloak from his shoulders, threw it on her own, left the granite and stones, and wished herself home again. But when the hunter had finished his sleep and awoke, he found that his love had betrayed him and left him alone on the wild mountain. "Oh," said he, "why is faithlessness so great in the world?" And he sat down in sorrow and trouble, not knowing what to do. But the mountain belonged to fierce and huge giants who lived on it and traded there, and he had not sat long before he saw 3 of them striding towards him. So he lay down as if he had fallen into a deep sleep. The giants came up. The first pushed him with his foot and said, "What sort of an earthworm is that?" The second said, "Crush him dead." But the third said contemptuously, "It is not worth the trouble. Let him live, he cannot remain here, and if he goes higher up the mountain, the clouds will take him and carry him off." Talking thus, they went away. But the hunter had listened to their talk, and as soon as they had gone, he rose and climbed to the summit. When he had sat there a little while, a cloud swept by, and, seizing him, carried him away. It traveled for a time in the sky, and then it sank down and hovered over a large vegetable garden surrounded by walls, so that he came safely to the ground amidst cabbages and vegetables. The hunter then looked about him, saying, "If only I had something to eat. I am so hungry, and it will go badly with me in the future, for I see here not an apple or pear or fruit of any kind, nothing but vegetables everywhere." At last he thought, "At a pinch I can eat a salad. It does not taste particularly nice, but it will refresh me." So he looked about for a good head and ate it. But no sooner had he swallowed a couple of mouthfuls than he felt very strange, and found himself wonderfully changed. 4 legs began to grow on him, a thick head, and 2 long ears, and he saw with horror that he had changed into a donkey. But as he was still very hungry, and this juicy salad tasted very good to his present nature, he went on eating with a still greater appetite. At last he got hold of another kind of cabbage, but scarcely had swallowed it when he felt another change, and he once more regained his human form. The hunter now lay down and slept off his weariness. When he awoke the next morning, he broke off a head of the bad and a head of the good cabbage, thinking, "This will help me to regain my own and to punish faithlessness." Then he put the heads in his pockets, climbed the wall, and started off to seek the castle of his love. When he had wandered about for a couple of days, he found it quite easily. He then browned his face quickly, so that his own mother would not have known him, and went into the castle, where he begged for a lodging. "I am so tired," he said, "I can go no farther." The witch asked, "Countryman, who are you, and what is your business?" He answered, "I am a messenger of the king, and have been sent to seek the finest salad that grows under the sun. I have been so lucky as to find it, and am bringing it with me, but the heat of the sun is so great that the tender cabbage threatens to grow soft, and I do not know if I shall be able to bring it any farther." When the old witch heard of the fine salad, she wanted to eat it, and said, "Dear countryman, just let me taste the wonderful salad." "Why not?" he answered. "I have brought 2 heads with me, and will give you one." So saying, he opened his sack and gave her the bad one. The witch suspected no evil, and her mouth watered to taste the new dish, so that she went into the kitchen to prepare it herself. When it was ready, she could not wait till it was served at the table, but she immediately took a couple of leaves and put them in her mouth. No sooner, however, had she swallowed them than she lost human form and ran into the courtyard in the shape of a donkey. Now the servant came into the kitchen, and when she saw the salad standing there ready cooked, she was about to carry it up. But on the way, according to her old habit, she tasted it and ate a couple of leaves. Immediately the charm worked, and she became a donkey, and ran out to join the old witch, and the dish with the salad in it fell to the ground. In the meantime, the messenger was sitting with the lovely maiden, and as no one came with the salad, and she wanted very much to taste it, she said, "I don't know where the salad is." Then thought the hunter, the cabbage must have already begun to work, and he said, "I will go to the kitchen and fetch it myself." When he came there, he saw the 2 donkeys running about in the courtyard, but the salad was lying on the ground. "That's all right," said he. "2 have had their share." And lifting the remaining leaves up, he laid them on the dish and brought them to the maiden. "I am bringing you the delicious food my own self," he said, "so that you need not wait any longer." Then she ate, and as the others had done, she at once lost her human form and ran as a donkey into the yard. When the hunter had washed his face, so that the changed ones might know him, he went into the yard, saying, "Now you shall receive a reward for your faithlessness." He tied them all 3 with a rope and drove them away till he came to a mill. He knocked at the window, and the miller put his head out and asked what he wanted. "I have 3 tiresome animals," he answered, "which I don't want to keep any longer. If you will take them, give them food and stabling, and do as I tell you with them, I will pay you as much as you want." The miller replied, "Why not? What shall I do with them?" Then the hunter said that to the old donkey, which was the witch, 3 beatings and 1 meal to the younger one, which was the servant, 1 beating and 3 meals, and to the youngest one, which was the maiden, no beating and 3 meals, for he could not find it in his heart to let the maiden be beaten. Then he went back into the castle, and he found there all that he wanted. After a couple of days, the miller came and said that he must tell him that the old donkey, which was to have 3 beatings and only 1 meal, had died. "The 2 others," he added, "are certainly not dead, and get their 3 meals every day, but they are so sad that they cannot last much longer." Then the hunter took pity on them, laid aside his anger, and told the miller to drive them back again. And when they came, he gave them some of the good cabbage to eat, so that they became human again. Then the beautiful maiden fell on her knees before him, saying, "Oh, my dearest, forgive me the ill I have done you. My mother compelled me to do it. It was against my will, for I love you dearly. Your wishing cloak is hanging in a cupboard. And as for the bird heart, I will make a drink and give it back to you." But he changed his mind and said, "Keep it. It makes no difference, for I will take you to be my own dear true wife." And the wedding was celebrated, and they lived happy together till death. Very long ago, as old people have told me, there lived a terrible monster who came out of the north and laid waste whole tracts of country, devouring both men and beasts. And this monster was so destructive that it was feared that unless help came, no living creature would be left on the face of the earth. It had a body like an ox and legs like a frog, 2 short forelegs and 2 long ones behind. And besides that, it had a tail like a serpent, 10 fathoms in length. When it moved, it jumped like a frog, and with every spring, it covered half a mile of ground. Fortunately, its habit was to remain for several years in the same place, and not to move on till the whole neighborhood was eaten up. Nothing could hunt it, because its whole body was covered with scales, which were harder than stone or metal. Its 2 great eyes shone by night, and even by day, like the brightest lamps, and anyone who had the ill luck to look into those eyes became, as it were, bewitched, and was obliged to rush of his own accord into the monster's jaws. In this way, the dragon was able to feed upon both men and beasts without the least trouble to itself, as it needed not to move from the spot where it was lying. All the neighboring kings had offered rich rewards to anyone who should be able to destroy the monster, either by force or enchantment, and many had tried their luck, but all had miserably failed. Once a great forest in which the dragon lay had been set on fire. The forest was burnt down, but the fire did not do the monster the least harm. However, there was a tradition amongst the wise men of the country that the dragon might be overcome by one who possessed King Solomon's signet ring, upon which a secret writing was engraved. This inscription would enable anyone who was wise enough to interpret it to find out how the dragon could be destroyed. Only no one knew where the ring was hidden, nor was there any sorcerer or learned man to be found who would be able to explain the inscription. At last, a young man, with a good heart and plenty of courage, set out to search for the ring. He took his way towards the sun rising, because he knew that all the wisdom of old time comes from the east. After some years, he met with a famous Eastern magician and asked for his advice in the matter. The magician answered, "Mortal men have but little wisdom and can give you no help, but the birds of the air would be better guides to you if you could learn their language. I can help you to understand it if you will stay with me a few days." The youth thankfully accepted the magician's offer and said, "I cannot now offer you any reward for your kindness, but should my undertaking succeed, your trouble shall be richly repaid." Then the magician brewed a powerful potion out of 9 sorts of herbs, which he had gathered himself all alone by moonlight, and he gave the youth 9 spoonfuls of it daily for 3 days, which made him able to understand the language of birds. At parting, the magician said to him, "If you ever find Solomon's ring and get possession of it, then come back to me, that I may explain the inscription on the ring to you, for there is no one else in the world who can do this." From that time, the youth never felt lonely as he walked along. He always had company, because he understood the language of birds, and in this way he learned many things which mere human knowledge could never have taught him. But time went on, and he heard nothing about the ring. It happened one evening, when he was hot and tired with walking and had sat down under a tree in a forest to eat his supper, that he saw 2 gaily plumaged birds that were strange to him, sitting at the top of the tree, talking to one another about him. The first bird said, "I know that wandering fool under the tree there, who has come so far without finding what he seeks. He is trying to find King Solomon's lost ring." The other bird answered, "He will have to seek help from the witch maiden, 3, who will doubtless be able to put him on the right track. If she has not got the ring herself, she knows well enough who has it." 3, Hollenmadchen. "But where is he to find the witch maiden?" said the first bird. "She has no settled dwelling, but is here today and gone tomorrow. He might as well try to catch the wind." The other replied, "I do not know, certainly, where she is at present, but in 3 nights from now she will come to the spring to wash her face, as she does every month when the moon is full, in order that she may never grow old nor wrinkled, but may always keep the bloom of youth." "Well," said the first bird, "the spring is not far from here. Shall we go and see how it is she does it?" "Willingly, if you like," said the other. The youth immediately resolved to follow the birds to the spring. Only 2 things made him uneasy. First, lest he might be asleep when the birds went, and secondly, lest he might lose sight of them, since he had not wings to carry him along so swiftly. He was too tired to keep awake all night, yet his anxiety prevented him from sleeping soundly. And when with the earliest dawn he looked up to the treetop, he was glad to see his feathered companions still asleep with their heads under their wings. He ate his breakfast and waited until the birds should start, but they did not leave the place all day. They hopped about from one tree to another looking for food all day long until the evening, when they went back to their old perch to sleep. The next day the same thing happened, but on the third morning one bird said to the other, "Today we must go to the spring to see the witch maiden wash her face." They remained on the tree till noon. Then they flew away and went towards the south. The young man's heart beat with anxiety, lest he should lose sight of his guides, but he managed to keep the birds in view until they again perched upon a tree. The young man ran after them until he was quite exhausted and out of breath. And after 3 short rests, the birds at length reached a small open space in the forest, on the edge of which they placed themselves on the top of a high tree. When the youth had overtaken them, he saw that there was a clear spring in the middle of the space. He sat down at the foot of the tree upon which the birds were perched, and listened attentively to what they were saying to each other. "The sun is not down yet," said the first bird. "We must wait yet a while till the moon rises and the maiden comes to the spring. Do you think she will see that young man sitting under the tree? Nothing is likely to escape her eyes, certainly not a young man," said the other bird. "Will the youth have the sense not to let himself be caught in her toils? We will wait," said the first bird, "and see how they get on together." The evening light had quite faded, and the full moon was already shining down upon the forest when the young man heard a slight rustling sound. After a few moments, there came out of the forest a maiden, gliding over the grass so lightly that her feet seemed scarcely to touch the ground, and stood beside the spring. The youth could not turn away his eyes from the maiden, for he had never in his life seen a woman so beautiful. Without seeming to notice anything, she went to the spring, looked up to the full moon, then knelt down and bathed her face 9 times, then looked up to the moon again and walked 9 times round the well. And as she walked she sang this song, "Full-faced moon with light unshaded, let my beauty ne'er be faded. Never let my cheek grow pale. While the moon is waning nightly, may the maiden bloom more brightly. May her freshness never fail." Then she dried her face with her long hair and was about to go away, when her eye suddenly fell upon the spot where the young man was sitting, and she turned towards the tree. The youth rose and stood waiting. Then the maiden said, "You ought to have a heavy punishment because you have presumed to watch my secret doings in the moonlight. But I will forgive you this time, because you are a stranger and knew no better. But you must tell me truly who you are and how you came to this place, where no mortal has ever set foot before." The youth answered humbly, "Forgive me, beautiful maiden, if I have unintentionally offended you. I chanced to come here after long wandering, and found a good place to sleep under this tree. At your coming, I did not know what to do, but stayed where I was, because I thought my silent watching could not offend you." The maiden answered kindly, "Come and spend this night with us. You will sleep better on a pillow than on damp moss." The youth hesitated for a little, but Presently he heard the birds saying from the top of the tree, "Go where she calls you, but take care to give no blood, or you will sell your soul." So the youth went with her, and soon they reached a beautiful garden where stood a splendid house, which glittered in the moonlight as if it was all built out of gold and silver. When the youth entered, he found many splendid chambers, each one finer than the last. Hundreds of tapers burnt upon golden candlesticks and shed a light like the brightest day. At length, they reached a chamber where a table was spread with the most costly dishes. The table were placed 2 chairs, one of silver, the other of gold. The maiden seated herself upon the golden chair and offered the silver one to her companion. They were served by maidens dressed in white, whose feet made no sound as they moved about, and not a word was spoken during the meal. Afterwards, the youth and the witch maiden conversed pleasantly together, until a woman dressed in red came in to remind them that it was bedtime. The youth was now shown into another room containing a silken bed with down cushions, where he slept delightfully. Yet he seemed to hear a voice near his bed which repeated to him, "Remember to give no blood." The next morning the maiden asked him whether he would not like to stay with her always in this beautiful place, and as he did not answer immediately, she continued, "You see how I always remain young and beautiful, and I am under no one's orders, but can do just what I like, so that I have never thought of marrying before. But from the moment I saw you, I took a fancy to you, so if you agree, we might be married and might live together like princes, because I have great riches." The youth could not but be tempted with the beautiful maiden's offer, but he remembered how the birds had called her the witch, and their warning always sounded in his ears. Therefore he answered cautiously, "Do not be angry, dear maiden, if I do not decide immediately on this important matter. Give me a few days to consider before we come to an understanding." "Why not?" answered the maiden. "Take some weeks to consider if you like, and take counsel with your own heart." And to make the time pass pleasantly, she took the youth over every part of her beautiful dwelling and showed him all her splendid treasures. But these treasures were all produced by enchantment, for the maiden could make anything she wished appear by the help of King Solomon's signet ring. Only none of these things remained fixed. They passed away like the wind, without leaving a trace behind. But the youth did not know this. He thought they were all real. One day the maiden took him into a secret chamber, where a little gold box was standing on a silver table. Pointing to the box, she said, "Here is my greatest treasure, whose like is not to be found in the whole world. It is a precious gold ring. When you marry me, I will give you this ring as a marriage gift, and it will make you the happiest of mortal men. But in order that our love may last forever, you must give me for the ring 3 drops of blood from the little finger of your left hand." When the youth heard these words, a cold shudder ran over him, for he remembered that his soul was at stake. He was cunning enough, however, to conceal his feelings and to make no direct answer, but he only asked the maiden, as if carelessly, what was remarkable about the ring. She answered, "No mortal is able entirely to understand the power of this ring, because no one thoroughly understands the secret signs engraved upon it. But even with my half-knowledge, I can work great wonders. If I put the ring upon the little finger of my left hand, then I can fly like a bird through the air wherever I wish to go. If I put it on the third finger of my left hand, I am invisible, and I can see everything that passes around me, though no one can see me. If I put the ring upon the middle finger of my left hand, then neither fire nor water nor any sharp weapon can hurt me. If I put it on the forefinger of my left hand, then I can with its help produce whatever I wish. I can in a single moment build houses or anything I desire. Finally, as long as I wear the ring on the thumb of my left hand, that hand is so strong that it can break down rocks and walls. Besides these, the ring has other secret signs, which, as I said, no one can understand. No doubt it contains secrets of great importance. The ring formerly belonged to King Solomon, the wisest of kings, during whose reign the wisest men lived, but it is not known whether this ring was ever made by mortal hands. It is supposed that an angel gave it to the wise king. When the youth heard all this, he determined to try and get possession of the ring, though he did not quite believe in all its wonderful gifts. He wished the maiden would let him have it in his hand, but he did not quite like to ask her to do so, and after a while, she put it back into the box. A few days after they were again speaking of the magic ring, and the youth said, "I do not think it possible that the ring can have all the power you say it has." Then the maiden opened the box and took the ring out, and it glittered as she held it like the clearest sunbeam. She put it on the middle finger of her left hand and told the youth to take a knife and try as hard as he could to cut her with it, for he would not be able to hurt her. He was unwilling at first, but the maiden insisted. Then he tried, at first only in play and then seriously, to strike her with the knife. But an invisible wall of iron seemed to be between them, and the maiden stood before him, laughing and unhurt. Then she put the ring on her third finger, and in an instant she had vanished from his eyes. Presently she was beside him again, laughing and holding the ring between her fingers. "Do let me try," said the youth, "whether I can do these wonderful things." The maiden, suspecting no treachery, gave him the magic ring. The youth pretended to have forgotten what to do, and asked what finger he must put the ring on so that no sharp weapon could hurt him. "Oh, the middle finger of your left hand," the maiden answered, laughing. She took the knife and tried to strike the youth, and he even tried to cut himself with it, but found it impossible. Then he asked the maiden to show him how to split stones and rocks with the help of the ring. So she led him into a courtyard where stood a great boulder stone. "Now," she said, "put the ring upon the thumb of your left hand, and you will see how strong that hand has become." The youth did so, and found to his astonishment that with a single blow of his fist, the stone flew into 1,000 pieces. Then the youth bethought him that he who does not use his luck when he has it is a fool, and that this was a chance which once lost might never return. So while they stood laughing at the shattered stone, he placed the ring, as if in play, upon the third finger of his left hand. "Now," said the maiden, "you are invisible to me until you take the ring off again." But the youth had no mind to do that. On the contrary, he went farther off, then put the ring on the little finger of his left hand, and soared into the air like a bird. When the maiden saw him flying away, she thought at first that he was still in play, and cried, "Come back, friend, for now you see I have told you the truth." But the young man never came back. the maiden saw she was deceived, and bitterly repented that she had ever trusted him with the ring. The young man never halted in his flight until he reached the dwelling of the wise magician who had taught him the speech of birds. The magician was delighted to find that his search had been successful, and at once set to work to interpret the secret signs engraved upon the ring. But it took him 7 weeks to make them out clearly. Then he gave the youth the following instructions: how to overcome the dragon of the north. You must have an iron horse cast, which must have little wheels under each foot. You must also be armed with a spear 2 fathoms long, which you will be able to wield by means of the magic ring upon your left thumb. The spear must be as thick in the middle as a large tree, and both its ends must be sharp. In the middle of the spear, you must have 2 strong chains 10 fathoms in length. As soon as the dragon has made himself fast to the spear, which you must thrust through his jaws, you must spring quickly from the iron horse and fasten the ends of the chains firmly to the ground with iron stakes, so that he cannot get away from them. After 2 or 3 days, the monster's strength will be so far exhausted that you will be able to come near him. Then you can put Solomon's ring upon your left thumb and give him the finishing stroke, but keep the ring on your 3rd finger until you have come close to him, so that the monster cannot see you, else he might strike you dead with his long tail. But when all is done, take care you do not lose the ring, and that no one takes it from you by cunning. The young man thanked the magician for his directions, and promised, should they succeed, to reward him. But the magician answered, I have profited so much by the wisdom the ring has taught me that I desire no other reward. Then they parted, and the youth quickly flew home through the air. After remaining in his own home for some weeks, he heard people say that the terrible dragon of the north was not far off, and might shortly be expected in the country. The king announced publicly that he would give his daughter in marriage, as well as a large part of his kingdom, to whosoever should free the country from the monster. The youth then went to the king and told him that he had good hopes of subduing the dragon if the king would grant him all he desired for the purpose. The king willingly agreed, and the iron horse, the great spear, and the chains were all prepared as the youth requested. When all was ready, it was found that the iron horse was so heavy that 100 men could not move it from the spot. So the youth found there was nothing for it but to move it with his own strength by means of the magic ring. The dragon was now so near that in a couple of springs he would be over the frontier. The youth now began to consider how he should act, for if he had to push the iron horse from behind, he could not ride upon it, as the sorcerer had said he must. But a raven unexpectedly gave him this advice: ride upon the horse and push the spear against the ground, as if you were pushing off a boat from the land. The youth did so, and found that in this way he could easily move forwards. The dragon had his monstrous jaws wide open, all ready for his expected prey. A few paces nearer, and man and horse would have been swallowed up by them. The youth trembled with horror, and his blood ran cold, yet he did not lose his courage, but holding the iron spear upright in his hand, he brought it down with all his might right through the monster's lower jaw. Then, quick as lightning, he sprang from his horse before the dragon had time to shut his mouth. A fearful clap like thunder, which could be heard for miles around, now warned him that the dragon's jaws had closed upon the spear. When the youth turned round, he saw the point of the spear sticking up high above the dragon's upper jaw, and knew that the other end must be fastened firmly to the ground. But the dragon had got his teeth fixed in the iron horse, which was now useless. The youth now hastened to fasten down the chains to the ground by means of the enormous iron pegs which he had provided. The death struggle of the monster lasted 3 days and 3 nights. In his writhing, he beat his tail so violently against the ground that at 10 miles distance the earth trembled as if with an earthquake. When he at length lost power to move his tail, the youth, with the help of the ring, took up a stone which 20 ordinary men could not have moved, and beat the dragon so hard about the head with it that very soon the monster lay lifeless before him. You can fancy how great was the rejoicing when the news was spread abroad that the terrible monster was dead. His conqueror was received into the city with as much pomp as if he had been the mightiest of kings. The old king did not need to urge his daughter to marry the slayer of the dragon. He found her already willing to bestow her hand upon this hero, who had done all alone what whole armies had tried in vain to do. In a few days, a magnificent wedding was celebrated, at which the rejoicings lasted 4 whole weeks, for all the neighboring kings had met together to thank the man who had freed the world from their common enemy. But everyone forgot amid the general joy that they ought to have buried the dragon's monstrous body, for it began now to have such a bad smell that no one could live in the neighborhood, and before long the whole air was poisoned, and a pestilence broke out which destroyed many hundreds of people. In this distress, the king's son-in-law resolved to seek help once more from the Eastern magician, to whom he had once traveled through the air like a bird by the help of the ring. But there is a proverb which says that ill-gotten gains never prosper, and the prince found that the stolen ring brought him ill luck after all. The witch maiden had never rested night nor day until she had found out where the ring was. As soon as she had discovered by means of magical arts that the prince in the form of a bird was on his way to the Eastern magician, she changed herself into an eagle and watched in the air until the bird she was waiting for came in sight, for she knew him at once by the ring which was hung round his neck by a ribbon. Then the eagle pounced upon the bird, and the moment she seized him in her talons, she tore the ring from his neck before the man in bird's shape had time to prevent her. Then the eagle flew down to the earth with her prey, and the two stood face to face once more in human form. "Now, villain, you are in my power," cried the witch maiden. "I favored you with my love, and you repaid me with treachery and theft. You stole my most precious jewel from me, and do you expect to live happily as the king's son-in-law? Now the tables are turned, you are in my power, and I will be revenged on you for your crimes. Forgive me, cried the prince. I know too well how deeply I have wronged you, and most heartily do I repent it. The maiden answered, Your prayers and your repentance come too late, and if I were to spare you, everyone would think me a fool. You have doubly wronged me. First, you scorned my love, and then you stole my ring, and you must bear the punishment. With these words, she put the ring upon her left thumb, lifted the young man with one hand and walked away with him under her arm. This time, she did not take him to a splendid palace, but to a deep cave in a rock where there were chains hanging from the wall. The maiden now chained the young man's hands and feet so that he could not escape. Then she said in an angry voice, "Here you shall remain chained up until you die. I will bring you every day enough food to prevent you dying of hunger. But you need never hope for freedom anymore." With these words, she left him. The old king and his daughter waited anxiously for many weeks for the prince's return, but no news of him arrived. The king's daughter often dreamed that her husband was going through some great suffering. She therefore begged her father to summon all the enchanters and magicians that they might try to find out where the prince was and how he could be set free. But the magicians, with all their arts, could find out nothing, except that he was still living and undergoing great suffering, but none could tell where he was to be found. At last, a celebrated magician from Finland was brought before the king, who had found out that the king's son-in-law was imprisoned in the East, not by men, but by some more powerful being. The king now sent messengers to the East to look for his son-in-law, and they by good luck met with the old magician who had interpreted the signs on King Solomon's ring, and thus was possessed of more wisdom than anyone else in the world. The magician soon found out what he wished to know, and pointed out the place where the prince was imprisoned, but said, "He is kept there by enchantment, and cannot be set free without my help. I will therefore go with you myself." So they all set out, guided by birds, and after some days came to the cave where the unfortunate prince had been chained up for nearly 7 years. He recognized the magician immediately, but the old man did not know him. He had grown so thin. However, he undid the chains by the help of magic and took care of the prince until he recovered and became strong enough to travel. When he reached home, he found that the old king had died that morning, so that he was now raised to the throne. And now, after his long suffering, came prosperity, which lasted to the end of his life. But he never got back the magic ring, nor has it ever again been seen by mortal eyes. Now, if you had been the prince, would you not rather have stayed with the pretty witch maiden? Without hurry, the next story drifts in, calm and unspoken. Once upon a time, there was a fisherman who had a wife and 3 children. Every morning he used to go out fishing, and whatever fish he caught he sold to the king. One day, among the other fishes, he caught a golden crab. When he came home, he put all the fishes together into a great dish, but he kept the crab separate because it shone so beautifully, and placed it upon a high shelf in the cupboard. Now, while the old woman, his wife, was cleaning the fish and had tucked up her gown so that her feet were visible, she suddenly heard a voice which said, let down thy petticoat that lets thy feet be seen." She turned round in surprise, and then she saw the little creature, the golden crab. "What, you can speak, can you, you ridiculous crab?" she said, for she was not quite pleased at the crab's remarks. Then she took him up and placed him on a dish. When her husband came home and they sat down to dinner, they presently heard the crab's little voice saying, "Give me some too." They were all very much surprised, but they gave him something to eat. When the old man came to take away the plate which had contained the crab's dinner, he found it full of gold, and as the same thing happened every day, he soon became very fond of the crab. One day the crab said to the fisherman's wife, "Go to the king and tell him I wish to marry his younger daughter." The old woman went accordingly and laid the matter before the king, who laughed a little at the notion of his daughter marrying a crab, but did not decline the proposal altogether, because he was a prudent monarch and knew that the crab was likely to be a prince in disguise. He said, therefore, to the fisherman's wife, "Go, old woman, and tell the crab I will give him my daughter if by tomorrow morning he can build a wall in front of my castle much higher than my tower, upon which all the flowers of the world must grow and bloom." The fisherman's wife went home and gave this message. Then the crab gave her a golden rod and said, "Go and strike with this rod 3 times upon the ground on the place which the king showed you, and tomorrow morning the wall will be there." The old woman did so and went away again. The next morning, when the king awoke, what do you think he saw? The wall stood there before his eyes, exactly as he had bespoken it. Then the old woman went back to the king and said to him, "Your Majesty's orders have been fulfilled." "That is all very well," said the king, "but I cannot give away my daughter until there stands in front of my palace a garden in which there are 3 fountains, of which the first must play gold, the second diamonds, and the third brilliants." So the old woman had to strike again 3 times upon the ground with the rod, and the next morning the garden was there. The king now gave his consent, and the wedding was fixed for the very next day. Then the crab said to the old fisherman, "Now take this rod, go and knock with it on a certain mountain. Then a black man, 6, will come out and ask you what you wish for. Answer him thus: 'Your master, the king, has sent me to tell you that you must send him his golden garment that is like the sun. Make him give you, besides, the queenly robes of gold and precious stones, which are like the flowery meadows, and bring them both to me. And bring me also the golden cushion. 6 ein more.'" The old man went and did his errand. When he had brought the precious robes, the crab put on the golden garment and then crept upon the golden cushion. And in this way the fisherman carried him to the castle, where the crab presented the other garment to his bride. Now the ceremony took place, and when the married pair were alone together, the crab made himself known to his young wife, and told her how he was the son of the greatest king in the world, and how he was enchanted, so that he became a crab by day, and was a man only at night. And he could also change himself into an eagle as often as he wished. No sooner had he said this than he shook himself, and immediately became a handsome youth. But the next morning he was forced to creep back again into his crab shell, and the same thing happened every day. But the princess's affection for the crab, and the polite attention with which she behaved to him, surprised the royal family very much. They suspected some secret, but though they spied and spied, they could not discover it. Thus a year passed away, and the princess had a son, whom she called Benjamin. But her mother still thought the whole matter very strange. At last she said to the king that he ought to ask his daughter whether she would not like to have another husband instead of the crab. But when the daughter was questioned, she only answered, "I am married to the crab, and him only will I have." Then the king said to her, "I will appoint a tournament in your honor, and I will invite all the princes in the world to it. And if any one of them pleases you, you shall marry him." In the evening, the princess told this to the crab, who said to her, "Take this rod, go to the garden gate and knock with it. Then a black man will come out and say to you, 'Why have you called me? And what do you require of me?' Answer him thus, 'Your master, the king, has sent me hither to tell you to send him his golden armor and his steed and the silver apple, and bring them to me.' The princess did so and brought him what he desired. The following evening, the prince dressed himself for the tournament. Before he went, he said to his wife, "Now mind you do not say when you see me that I am the crab, for if you do, this evil will come of it. Place yourself at the window with your sisters. I will ride by and throw you the silver apple. Take it in your hand, but if they ask you who I am, say that you do not know." So saying, he kissed her, repeated his warning once more, and went away. The princess went with her sisters to the window and looked on at the tournament. Presently her husband rode by and threw the apple up to her. She caught it in her hand and went with it to her room, and by her husband came back to her. But her father was much surprised that she did not seem to care about any of the princes. He therefore appointed a second tournament. The crab then gave his wife the same directions as before, only this time the apple which she received from the black man was of gold. But before the prince went to the tournament, he said to his wife, "Now I know you will betray me today." But she swore to him that she would not tell who he was. He then repeated his warning and went away. In the evening, while the princess, with her mother and sisters, was standing at the window, the prince suddenly galloped past on his steed and threw her the golden apple. Then her mother flew into a passion, gave her a box on the ear, and cried out, "Does not even that prince please you, you fool?" The princess, in her fright, exclaimed, "That is the crab himself." Her mother was still more angry because she had not been told sooner, ran into her daughter's room where the crab shell was still lying, took it up, and threw it into the fire. Then the poor princess cried bitterly, but it was of no use. Her husband did not come back. Now we must leave the princess and turn to the other persons in the story. One day an old man went to a stream to dip in a crust of bread which he was going to eat, when a dog came out of the water, snatched the bread from his hand, and ran away. The old man ran after him, but the dog reached a door, pushed it open, and ran in, the old man following him. He did not overtake the dog, but found himself above a staircase, which he descended. Then he saw before him a stately palace, and entering, found in a large hall a table set for 12 persons. He hid himself in the hall behind a great picture, that he might see what would happen. At noon he heard a great noise, so that he trembled with fear. When he took courage to look out from behind the picture, he saw 12 eagles flying in. At this sight, his fear became still greater. The eagles flew to the basin of a fountain that was there, and bathed themselves, when suddenly they were changed into 12 handsome youths. Now they seated themselves at the table, and one of them took up a goblet filled with wine, and said, "A health to my father." And another said, "A health to my mother." And so the healths went round. Then one of them said, "A health to my dearest lady, long may she live and well." But a curse on the cruel mother that burnt my golden shell." And so saying, he wept bitterly. Then the youths rose from the table, went back to the great stone fountain, turned themselves into eagles again, and flew away. Then the old man went away too, returned to the light of day, and went home. Soon after he heard that the princess was ill, and that the only thing that did her good was having stories told to her. He therefore went to the royal castle, obtained an audience of the princess, and told her about the strange things he had seen in the underground palace. No sooner had he finished than the princess asked him whether he could find the way to that palace. Yes, he answered, certainly, and now she desired him to guide her thither at once. The old man did so, and when they came to the palace, he hid her behind the great picture and advised her to keep quite still, and he placed himself behind the picture also. Presently the eagles came flying in and changed themselves into young men, and in a moment the princess recognized her husband amongst them all and tried to come out of her hiding place, but the old man held her back. The youths seated themselves at the table, and now the prince said again, while he took up the cup of wine, "A health to my dearest lady, long may she live and well, but a curse on the cruel mother that burnt my golden shell." Then the princess could restrain herself no longer, but ran forward and threw her arms round her husband. And immediately he knew her again and said, "Do you remember how I told you that day that you would betray me? Now you see that I spoke the truth, but all that bad time is past. Now listen to me. I must still remain enchanted for 3 months. Will you stay here with me till that time is over?" So the princess stayed with him and said to the old man, "Go back to the castle and tell my parents that I am staying here." Her parents were very much vexed when the old man came back and told them this, but as soon as the 3 months of the prince's enchantment were over, he ceased to be an eagle and became once more a man, and they returned home together. And then they lived happily, and we who hear the story are happier still. Let the pages turn slowly as the night continues its gentle flow. Once upon a time, when wishes came true, there was a king's son who was enchanted by an old witch, so that he was obliged to sit in a large iron stove in a wood. There he lived for many years, and no one could free him. At last, a king's daughter came into the wood. She had lost her way and could not find her father's kingdom again. She had been wandering round and round for 9 days, and she came at last to the iron case. A voice came from within and asked her, "Where do you come from, and where do you want to go?" She answered, "I have lost my way to my father's kingdom, and I shall never get home again." Then the voice from the iron stove said, "I will help you to find your home again, and that in a very short time, if you will promise to do what I ask you. I am a greater prince than you are a princess, and I will marry you." Then she grew frightened and thought, "What can a young lassie do with an iron stove?" But as she wanted very much to go home to her father, she promised to do what he wished. He said, "You must come again, and bring a knife with you to scrape a hole in the iron." Then he gave her someone for a guide, who walked near her and said nothing, but he brought her in 2 hours to her house. There was great joy in the castle when the princess came back, and the old king fell on her neck and kissed her. But she was very much troubled and said, "Dear father, listen to what has befallen me. I should never have come home again out of the great wild wood if I had not come to an iron stove, to whom I have had to promise that I will go back to free him and marry him. The old king was so frightened that he nearly fainted, for she was his only daughter. So they consulted together and determined that the miller's daughter, who was very beautiful, should take her place. They took her there, gave her a knife, and said she must scrape at the iron stove. She scraped for 24 hours, but did not make the least impression. When the day broke, a voice called from the iron stove, "It seems to me that it is day outside." Then she answered, "It seems so to me. I think I hear my father's mill rattling. So you are a miller's daughter. Then go away at once and tell the king's daughter to come." Then she went away and told the old king that the thing inside the iron stove would not have her, but wanted the princess. The old king was frightened, and his daughter wept. But they had a swineherd's daughter who was even more beautiful than the miller's daughter, and they gave her a piece of gold to go to the iron stove instead of the princess. Then she was taken out and had to scrape for 24 hours, but she could make no impression. As soon as the day broke, the voice from the stove called out, "It seems to be daylight outside." Then she answered, "It seems so to me too. I think I hear my father blowing his horn. So you are a swineherd's daughter. Go away at once and let the king's daughter come. And say to her that what I foretell shall come to pass. And if she does not come, everything in the kingdom shall fall into ruin, and not one stone shall be left upon another." When the princess heard this, she began to cry, but it was no good. She had to keep her word. She took leave of her father, put a knife in her belt, and went to the iron stove in the wood. As soon as she reached it, she began to scrape, and the iron gave way, and before 2 hours had passed, she had made a little hole. Then she peeped in and saw such a beautiful youth, all shining with gold and precious stones, that she fell in love with him on the spot. So she scraped away harder than ever, and made the hole so large that he could get out. Then he said, "You are mine, and I am thine. You are my bride, and have set me free." He wanted to take her with him to his kingdom, but she begged him just to let her go once more to her father, and the prince let her go, but told her not to say more than 3 words to her father, then to come back again. So she went home, but alas, she said more than 3 words, and immediately the iron stove vanished and went away over a mountain of glass and sharp swords. But the prince was free and was no longer shut up in it. Then she said goodbye to her father and took a little money with her and went again into the great wood to look for the iron stove, but she could not find it. She sought it for 9 days, and then her hunger became so great that she did not know how she could live any longer. And when it was evening, she climbed a little tree and wished that the night would not come, because she was afraid of the wild beasts. When midnight came, she saw afar off a little light and thought, "Ah, if only I could reach that." Then she got down from the tree and went towards the light. She came to a little old house with a great deal of grass growing round, and stood in front of a little heap of wood. She thought, "Alas, what am I coming to?" and peeped through the window, but she saw nothing inside except big and little toads, and a table beautifully spread with roast meats and wine, and all the dishes and drinking cups were of silver. Then she took heart and knocked. Then a fat toad called out, "Little green toad with leg like crook, open wide the door." and look who it was the latch that shook. And a little toad came forward and let her in. When she entered, they all bid her welcome and made her sit down. They asked her how she came there and what she wanted. Then she told everything that had happened to her, and how, because she had exceeded her permission only to speak 3 words, the stove had disappeared with the prince, and how she had searched a very long time and must wander over mountain and valley till she found him. Then the old toad said, "Little green toad, whose leg doth twist, go to the corner of which you wist, and bring to me the large old kist." And the little toad went and brought out a great chest. Then they gave her food and drink, and led her to a beautifully made bed of silk and samite, on which she lay down and slept soundly. When the day dawned, she arose, and the old toad gave her 3 things out of the huge chest to take with her. She would have need of them, for she had to cross a high glass mountain, 3 cutting swords, and a great lake. When she had passed these, she would find her lover again. So she was given 3 large needles, a plow wheel, and 3 nuts, which she was to take great care of. She set out with these things, and when she came to the glass mountain, which was so slippery, she stuck the 3 needles behind her feet, and then in front, and so got over it. And when she was on the other side, put them carefully away. Then she reached the 3 cutting swords, and got on her plow wheel, and rolled over them. At last she came to a great lake, and when she had crossed that, arrived at a beautiful castle. She went in and gave herself out as a servant, a poor maid who would gladly be engaged, but she knew that the prince whom she had freed from the iron stove in the great wood was in the castle. So she was taken on as a kitchen maid for very small wages. Now the prince was about to marry another princess, for he thought she was dead long ago. In the evening, when she had washed up and was ready, she felt in her pocket and found the 3 nuts which the old toad had given her. She cracked one and was going to eat the kernel, when behold, there was a beautiful royal dress inside it. When the bride heard of this, she came and begged for the dress, and wanted to buy it, saying that it was not a dress for a serving maid. Then she said she would not sell it unless she was granted one favor, namely, to sleep by the prince's door. The bride granted her this, because the dress was so beautiful, and she had so few like it. When it was evening, she said to her bridegroom, "That stupid maid wants to sleep by your door. If you are contented, I am," he said. But she gave him a glass of wine in which she had poured a sleeping draught. Then they both went to his room, but he slept so soundly that she could not wake him. The maid wept all night long and said, "I freed you in the wild wood out of the iron stove. I have sought you, and have crossed a glassy mountain, 3 sharp swords, and a great lake before I found you. And will you not hear me now?" The servants outside heard how she cried the whole night, and they told their master in the morning. When she had washed up the next evening, she bit the 2nd nut, and there was a still more beautiful dress inside. When the bride saw it, she wanted to buy it also. But the maid did not want money, and asked that she should sleep again by the prince's door. The bride, however, gave him a sleeping draught, and he slept so soundly that he heard nothing. But the kitchen maid wept the whole night long, and said, "I have freed you in a wood, and from an iron stove. I sought you, and have crossed a glassy mountain, 3 sharp swords, and a great lake to find you. And now you will not hear me." The servants outside heard how she cried the whole night, and in the morning they told their master. And when she had washed up on the third night, she bit the third nut, and there was a still more beautiful dress inside that was made of pure gold. When the bride saw it, she wanted to have it, but the maid would only give it her on condition that she should sleep for the third time by the prince's door. But the prince took care not to drink the sleeping draught. When she began to weep and to say, "Dearest sweetheart, I freed you in the horrible wild wood," and from an iron stove, he jumped up and said, "You are right. You are mine, and I am thine." Though it was still night, he got into a carriage with her, and they took the false bride's clothes away, so that she could not follow them. When they came to the great lake, they rowed across, and when they reached the 3 sharp swords, they sat on the plow wheel, and on the glassy mountain they stuck the 3 needles in. So they arrived at last at the little old house, but when they stepped inside, it turned into a large castle. The toads were all freed and were beautiful king's children, running about for joy. There they were married, and they remained in the castle, which was much larger than that of the princess's fathers. But because the old man did not like being left alone, they went and fetched him. So they had 2 kingdoms and lived in great wealth. A mouse has run, my story's done. Stay comfortable and allow the final story to carry you deeper into rest. A king was once hunting in a great wood, and he hunted the game so eagerly that none of his courtiers could follow him. When evening came on, he stood still and looked round him, and he saw that he had quite lost himself. He sought a way out, but could find none. Then he saw an old woman with a shaking head coming towards him, but she was a witch. "Good woman," he said to her, "can you not show me the way out of the wood?" "Oh, certainly, Sir King," she replied, "I can quite well do that, but on one condition, which if you do not fulfill, you will never get out of the wood, and will die of hunger." "What is the condition?" asked the king. "I have a daughter," said the old woman, "who is so beautiful that she has not her equal in the world, and is well fitted to be your wife. If you will make her lady queen, I will show you the way out of the wood." The king, in his anguish of mind, consented, and the old woman led him to her little house, where her daughter was sitting by the fire. She received the king as if she were expecting him, and he saw that she was certainly very beautiful, but she did not please him, and he could not look at her without a secret feeling of horror. As soon as he had lifted the maiden on to his horse, the old woman showed him the way, and the king reached his palace, where the wedding was celebrated. The king had already been married once, and had by his first wife 7 children, 6 boys and 1 girl, whom he loved more than anything in the world. And now, because he was afraid that their stepmother might not treat them well and might do them harm, he put them in a lonely castle that stood in the middle of a wood. It lay so hidden, and the way to it was so hard to find, that he himself could not have found it out had not a wise woman given him a reel of thread, which possessed a marvelous property. When he threw it before him, it unwound itself and showed him the way. But the king went so often to his dear children that the queen was offended at his absence. She grew curious and wanted to know what he had to do quite alone in the wood. She gave his servants a great deal of money, and they betrayed the secret to her and also told her of the reel, which alone could point out the way. She had no rest now till she had found out where the king guarded the reel, and then she made some little white shirts, and, as she had learnt from her witch mother, sewed an enchantment in each of them. And when the king had ridden off, she took the little shirts and went into the wood, and the reel showed her the way. The children, who saw someone coming in the distance, thought it was their dear father coming to them and sprang to meet him very joyfully. Then she threw over each one a little shirt, which when it had touched their bodies changed them into swans, and they flew away over the forest. The queen went home quite satisfied and thought she had got rid of her stepchildren, but the girl had not run to meet her with her brothers, and she knew nothing of her. The next day the king came to visit his children, but he found no one but the girl. "Where are your brothers?" asked the king. "Alas, dear father," she answered, "they have gone away and left me all alone." And she told him that looking out of her little window, she had seen her brothers flying over the wood in the shape of swans, and she showed him the feathers which they had let fall in the yard, and which she had collected. The king mourned, but he did not think that the queen had done the wicked deed, and as he was afraid the maiden would also be taken from him, he wanted to take her with him, but she was afraid of the stepmother, and begged the king to let her stay just one night more in the castle in the wood. The poor maiden thought, "My home is no longer here. I will go and seek my brothers." And when night came, she fled away into the forest. She ran all through the night and the next day, till she could go no farther for weariness. Then she saw a little hut, went in, and found a room with 6 little beds. She was afraid to lie down on one, so she crept under one of them, lay on the hard floor, and was going to spend the night there. But when the sun had set, she heard a noise, and saw 6 swans flying in at the window. They stood on the floor and blew at one another, and blew all their feathers off, and their swan skin came off like a shirt. Then the maiden recognized her brothers, and overjoyed she crept out from under the bed. Her brothers were not less delighted than she to see their little sister again, but their joy did not last long. "You cannot stay here," they said to her. "This is a den of robbers. If they were to come here and find you, they would kill you." "Could you not protect me?" asked the little sister. "No," they answered, "for we can only lay aside our swan skins for a quarter of an hour every evening. For this time we regain our human forms, but then we are changed into swans again." Then the little sister cried and said, "Can you not be freed?" "Oh, no," they said, "the conditions are too hard. You must not speak or laugh for 6 years, and must make in that time 6 shirts for us of starflowers. If a single word comes out of your mouth, all your labor is vain." And when the brothers had said this, the quarter of an hour came to an end, and they flew away out of the window as swans. But the maiden had determined to free her brothers, even if it should cost her her life. She left the hut, went into the forest, climbed a tree, and spent the night there. The next morning she went out, collected starflowers, and began to sew. She could speak to no one, and she had no wish to laugh, so she sat there, looking only at her work. When she had lived there some time, it happened that the king of the country was hunting in the forest, and his hunters came to the tree on which the maiden sat. They called to her and said, "Who are you?" But she gave no answer. "Come down to us," they said. "We will do you no harm." But she shook her head silently. As they pressed her further with questions, she threw them the golden chain from her neck. But they did not leave off, and she threw them her girdle, and when this was no use, her garters, and then her dress. The huntsmen would not leave her alone, but climbed the tree, lifted the maiden down, and led her to the king. The king asked, "Who are you? What are you doing up that tree?" But she answered nothing. He asked her in all the languages he knew, but she remained as dumb as a fish. Because she was so beautiful, however, the king's heart was touched, and he was seized with a great love for her. He wrapped her up in his cloak, placed her before him on his horse, and brought her to his castle. There he had her dressed in rich clothes, and her beauty shone out as bright as day, but not a word could be drawn from her. He set her at table by his side, and her modest ways and behavior pleased him so much that he said, "I will marry this maiden and none other in the world," and after some days he married her. But the king had a wicked mother who was displeased with the marriage, and said wicked things of the young queen. "Who knows who this girl is?" she said. "She cannot speak, and is not worthy of a king." After a year, when the queen had her first child, the old mother took it away from her. Then she went to the king and said that the queen had killed it. The king would not believe it and would not allow any harm to be done her. But she sat quietly sewing at the shirts and troubling herself about nothing. The next time she had a child, the wicked mother did the same thing, but the king could not make up his mind to believe her. He said, "She is too sweet and good to do such a thing as that. If she were not dumb and could defend herself, her innocence would be proved." But when the third child was taken away, and the queen was again accused and could not utter a word in her own defense, the king was obliged to give her over to the law, which decreed that she must be burnt to death. When the day came on which the sentence was to be executed, it was the last day of the 6 years in which she must not speak or laugh. And now she had freed her dear brothers from the power of the enchantment. The 6 shirts were done. There was only the left sleeve wanting to the last. When she was led to the stake, she laid the shirts on her arm, and as she stood on the pile and the fire was about to be lighted, she looked around her and saw 6 swans flying through the air. Then she knew that her release was at hand, and her heart danced for joy. The swans fluttered round her and hovered low so that she could throw the shirts over them. When they had touched them, the swan skins fell off, and her brothers stood before her living, well and beautiful. Only the youngest had a swan's wing instead of his left arm. They embraced and kissed each other, and the queen went to the king, who was standing by in great astonishment, and began to speak to him, saying, "Dearest husband, now I can speak and tell you openly that I am innocent and have been falsely accused." She told him of the old woman's deceit and how she had taken the 3 children away and hidden them. Then they were fetched, to the great joy of the king, and the wicked mother came to no good end. But the king and the queen with their 6 brothers lived many years in happiness and peace.